Imagine being told your son is gone. You are standing in a hospital room, machines are beeping, doctors are shaking their heads, and they look you in the eye and say there is no hope. They tell you your son is brain dead. I mean brain dead. That he will never come back. And that the only thing keeping him alive is the ventilator, and that by tomorrow exactly 11:54 p.m. they will be removing the life support. What will you do in that moment? Most parents will crumble under the weight of that decision, but one father in Texas, George Peak, didn't. He refused to accept it, and what he did next will shock everyone. He ended up in prison not because he breaks the law himself, but because he fought to give his son one more chance at life. This is the incredible story of George Peak and his son. The story begins in the early 2000s in Houston, Texas. George Peak was an ordinary man, not wealthy, not famous, just a father who loved his son more than anything in the world. His son had been admitted to Ben Taub Hospital after suffering a medical crisis. The details of what put him there ain't the focus at all. But what mattered was this. After days of tests, the doctors concluded that there was no brain activity. To them, the boy was gone. In medical terms, brain death is considered the end. When a patient is declared brain dead, doctors typically recommend removing life support. Families are told there is nothing left to fight for. But George couldn't accept that. He spent hours by his son's bedside, watching, hoping, praying for some signs that the boy was still in there. And every time he looked at his son, he thought he's not gone, it's not over yet. He begged doctors to keep trying their best, to run more tests, to give his son more time. But the doctors told him the results were clear. They insisted there was nothing more to be done. That's when George made a decision that could change everything. When doctors prepared to remove life support, he told the medical team that they weren't going to remove his son from life support. Not today, not ever. Unless he was certain his son was truly gone. In that instant, the entire hospital was thrown into chaos. Staff members scrambled. A lockdown was ordered. Police rushed to the scene. For 3 long hours, George stood his ground, refusing to let anyone near his son's room. The hospital halls filled with armed officers. Negotiators tried to talk George down, urging him to put the gun away because he did this while holding a gun, so no one could come close. Nurse and doctors were terrified, waiting outside the room, and inside, George stayed with his son, clutching his hand, refusing to believe the words brain dead. For him, this wasn't about breaking the law, it was about saving his son. And then something extraordinary happened. During those tense hours, the doctors ran additional tests, and to everyone's shock, George's son responded. He squeezed his father's hand. That simple gesture, tiny movement, proved what George had been saying all along. There was brain activity. His son was still alive. The atmosphere shifted instantly. This wasn't just a grieving father in denial anymore. This was a father who had forced doctors to take another look, and the second look changed everything. Treatment continued. George finally laid down his gun and surrendered. He was taken into custody peacefully, but by then his mission had been accomplished. His son was still alive and he had bought him more time. George was arrested and charged with aggravated assault and deadly conduct for pulling a gun inside the hospital. The law didn't care about his motive, only about his action. He was convicted and sentenced to 11 months in prison. The law, as we know it, is not emotional. The law saw him as a criminal, and legally, that's what he was. But outside the courtroom, people couldn't help but ask, was he really a criminal or just a desperate father who refused to let go? And here is the part of the story that makes it unforgettable. While George was serving his sentence, his son recovered, not just slightly, not just a little improvement. He made a full recovery and made gallant recovery, defying every single prediction the doctors had made. The boy who was declared brain dead was alive and well, walking, talking, and living a normal life, all because his father refused to believe the experts and forced them to try again. Think about that for a moment. If George hadn't acted that way, if he had listened to the doctors, his son would have been taken off life support and the story would have ended there. Instead, by risking everything, including his freedom, George gave his son a chance to live. He paid for it nearly a year of his life behind bars. But his son's survival became the ultimate proof that he had been right all along. Cases like this are rare, but they strike something deep inside. We trust doctors, we rely on hospitals, but we also know that mistakes happen. And sometimes the human will to survive is stronger than any diagnosis. Judge Pick's story forces people to confront uncomfortable questions. What will you do if you were in his shoes? Would you accept what the expert says, or would you go to extreme lengths to fight for your child's life? In the end, George returned home after his sentence, and his son continued to live, a walking reminder of the day his father refused to give up on him. And that's what made this story stands out. It isn't just about crime, law, or medicine. It's about the raw, unshakable bond between a parent and a child. A bond so strong that one man was willing to risk everything, his freedom, his safety, and even reputation to keep his son alive. What a crazy experience. And this brings us to the end of this story. If you love this video, then you will love to watch this video about a grandmother named Cynthia DeBecker who intentionally killed her son-in-law for something so small that will leave you speechless. Don't forget to like, comment, and share this video. And also remember, on this channel, we post twice a week, Monday and Friday. See you in the next one, and remain Joshua Vejo. Peace out.